The small lake town was quiet that chilly afternoon. Wind moved through the trees and sent orange leaves down from the branches to the ground. A woman named Clara Wynne sat alone on a wooden bench near the lake.
Oh.
She wore a long coat and a scarf that moved slightly with the cold wind. Her hands held a paper cup of coffee that was already cold, but she did not notice it. She looked across the water, watching the surface ripple softly as though the lake itself was breathing. The sky was gray and heavy, and the whole world seemed sad with her. Clara had moved to this town only a few months before. She wanted a place where no one knew her story. In the city, memories of her fiancés were too strong. Every corner, every face, reminded her of what she had lost. The small town had felt quiet and safe when she first arrived. She rented a small house on the edge of town and worked in the library. People there were kind but respectful of her silence. They smiled, they said hello, but they never asked too many questions. That was what she liked. She wanted to be invisible for a while. Every Sunday, she came to this same bench near Lake Marin. She said nothing, just sat, listened to birds, and thought about how life could move on, even when hearts refused to. Some part of her still waited for someone who would never come back. That afternoon, she had not planned to cry. She hated when tears came. They made her feel weak and open. But as the shadow of the sun moved, and she saw a family walking together across the grass, her eyes grew wet. She turned her face away, but it was no use. The pain came like an old friend, steady and quiet. Two little boys were playing near the water's edge, not far from her bench. They were twins, both around 6 years old, both with bright brown hair and cheeks red from the cold. They threw small stones into the lake to watch ripples form and laugh. Their laughter was light like bells. Clara tried not to look, but then one of the stones slipped from a small hand and rolled near her boot. The boy ran to pick it up, but stopped when he saw that she was crying. He looked back at his brother, who came running too. Both stood in front of her, puzzled and curious. She quickly wiped her eyes and tried to smile. "Are you okay, ma'am?" the first twin asked. His voice was soft but sure. "Yes, darling, I'm fine," Clara said quietly. The second boy tilted his head. "You don't look fine. You look sad." Clara gave a shaky laugh. "Suppose I'm a little sad, yes." The boys looked at each other like they were having a silent talk only twins could have. Then, after a short moment, the first one said, "Don't cry, ma'am. You can share our dad." Clara blinked, confused, but a smile came through her tears. "Share your dad?" "Yes," said the second boy. "Makes pancakes and tells funny stories. He can make you smile again." At that moment, a man called from a few steps away. "Eli Noah, come here, please. Don't bother the lady." He was tall and strong-looking, wearing a flannel shirt and holding a paper bag from the bakery. His voice was gentle but firm. Twins looked back at him and giggled. "We're not bothering her," Noah said. "She's sad. We said she can share her dad." The man sighed but walked closer. Clara looked up and met his eyes. There was kindness there, though also a tiredness she could sense, even without words. "I'm sorry," he said, smiling awkwardly. "I talked to everyone. I hope they didn't upset you." "Not at all," Clara answered. "They're sweet boys." He nodded and looked at the twins. "Say sorry, boys." The twins both said sorry, but in a cheerful way that made her laugh again. Daniel, their father, smiled faintly. "Well," he said, "I suppose they can make anyone smile." "They can indeed," Clara said softly. He nodded once more, thanked her for understanding, and guided his sons away. The twins kept looking back and waving until they disappeared behind a row of trees. When Clara turned her gaze back to the water, the air around her somehow felt lighter. The ache in her chest did not vanish, but the warmth left by the twins lingered. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to her with such simple care. She looked at the lakeside again. The water reflected the last bit of sunset light. The reflection wavered and danced. Clara breathed deeply and thought of the silly words the boys had said. "You can share our dad." A quiet laugh escaped her, not out of mockery, but out of real feeling she hadn't known she still had. For the first time in many months, the sound of her own laughter did not sound strange to her ears. That night, as she walked home under the dim streetlights, Clara found herself looking up. The stars were faint, half hidden by the moving clouds. But even so, they were there. She thought maybe she would come to the lake again next Sunday. Maybe she would see the twins again. Maybe, just maybe, something small had changed inside her, the kind of small change that could begin a whole new story. Clara did go back to the lake the next Sunday. The air was a little warmer, and small flowers began to open near the edge of the water. She sat on the same bench with a small book in her hand. She tried to read, but her eyes kept looking up as if waiting for something she did not want to admit. After a while, she saw two small figures running from the playground to the lake. They were Eli and Noah, both wearing different colored jackets this time. Their laughter carried across the grass before they even reached her. When the twins spotted her, they waved so hard that their arms looked like they might fall off. She waved back, a smile growing on her face, before she even realized it. The boys rushed to her bench and began talking all at once about a frog they had found near the rocks. Their father, Daniel Hart, followed slowly behind them, holding a paper cup of coffee and pretending not to be out of breath from trying to keep up. He smiled when he reached the bench. "Seems you have company again," he said. Clara laughed softly. "It seems I do. Your sons are wonderful." "They try to be," Daniel said with a small grin. The twins sat on the ground near the bench, building towers from pebbles and sticks. Daniel watched them with quiet pride. Clara noticed how careful he was with them. He did not yell or scold when they dropped things. He spoke gently, always patient. It reminded her of someone kind she had once known long ago. They started talking. First about small things like the weather and the sudden appearance of spring flowers, then about where they were from. Daniel told her that he had lived in this town all his life. He worked as a carpenter and made furniture in a small workshop behind his house. His wife had been gone for years, though he did not explain how or why, and Clara did not ask. Clara shared that she worked in the town library and liked quiet places. She said she had come here for peace. Daniel nodded, as if he understood without needing more words. After that day, their paths crossed again and again. Sometimes Clara met the twins at the bakery when she stopped for bread after work. Sometimes Daniel would be carrying wood through the square, and they would greet each other. Once, when it began to rain suddenly, Daniel offered her a ride home in his old truck. She hesitated, but then said yes. They drove slowly through the wet streets, talking about simple things like books and the twins' school. Clara found herself laughing, and Daniel looked surprised but pleased at the sound. The twins also grew more attached to her. They came to the library one afternoon and proudly showed her the new words they had learned to read. Clara helped them find books with pictures of animals and sat with them on the floor while Daniel waited nearby, quietly watching. On another visit, Noah's kite tore while playing near the park. He looked heartbroken until Clara offered to mend it. That evening, she repaired it with steady hands and bright thread. The next morning, she met them again at the lake, and Noah jumped with joy when his kite flew higher than before. Daniel thanked her, his eyes soft with gratitude. One Saturday, Daniel brought her an old watch he had found in a box in his workshop. It was dusty and no longer ticking. He said he remembered her mentioning that she liked fixing small things. Clara took it home and cleaned it carefully. When she returned it to him the next week, the watch ticked again. He turned it over in his hand, smiling in quiet amazement. "Seems you brought this back to life," he said tenderly. "Maybe it just needed some attention," Clara replied. He looked at her then, a look that held something unspoken. Two people, both holding years of loss, could sometimes see the same kind of hurt in each other and not need to explain it. By the time weeks passed into the start of summer, Clara found herself thinking of the twins' laughter and Daniel's calm voice more often. Her evenings were no longer filled only with silence, even when she sat alone by the lake. Her mind played the memory of small feet running over grass and cheerful voices calling her name. One late afternoon, Eli and Noah brought her a small cupcake they had baked with their father. The icing was uneven, and the sprinkles had rolled off one side, but to Clara, it was perfect. She thanked them warmly and promised she would eat it slowly so it would last longer. The boys laughed and said she must come to their house next time because their dad could cook better than anyone in the town. Daniel looked embarrassed but did not argue. Clara promised she would visit one day. As the sun set behind the trees, the light reflected on the lake like 1,000 tiny lamps. The calm sound of water mixed with the quiet voices of the twins and Daniel's laughter. It felt natural, peaceful, and full of warmth. Clara realized she was no longer counting the hours of her loneliness. Something gentle had started to pull her back toward life again, one kind smile and one small moment at a time. Clara's days began to follow a kind rhythm. She still worked at the library and still took her quiet walks to the lake, but now she was not always alone. Sometimes Daniel and the twins joined her on weekends. They would feed ducks, skip stones, and laugh together until the sun went down. The boys asked her endless questions about everything they saw. Clara never grew tired of answering them. The sound of their voices filled spaces that had once felt empty. Inside her small house, Clara started to notice changes too. There were now tiny reminders of her new friends everywhere. A half-finished drawing by Noah was stuck to her fridge. Eli's paper airplane rested on the windowsill. A jar of wildflowers that Daniel had given her sat near the door. These small things made the house lighter, as if a bit of sunshine lived there, even on cloudy days. Thought. But life often brings back what we try to forget. One morning, Clara found a letter in her mailbox. The handwriting was familiar. It belonged to her late fiancé's brother, Peter. Her hand shook as she held it. The letter was gentle, yet painful. Peter wrote that her old apartment in the city was still vacant, waiting for her if she ever wanted to return. He told her about the things she had left behind, the old piano, the photos, the garden they had once planted. Reading his words opened every door she had worked so hard to close. That evening, she walked to the lake, the letter folded tight in her pocket. The sky looked strange and soft, as if it could not decide between rain and sun. Daniel found her there. He carried a small toolbox after fixing a gate near the school. Seeing her face, he sensed something was wrong. "Bad day?" he asked quietly. Clara nodded and took out the letter. "It is from the brother of the man I was supposed to marry. He wants me to come back to the city. I do not know what I should do." Daniel sat beside her. "Do you miss that life?" "Miss him," she answered. "But the city feels far away now. Still, I feel guilty that I am here, living this new way. It feels like I'm leaving him behind." Daniel looked at the water. "Sometimes holding on too tight keeps us from moving at all." "I know that too well." Clara turned to him. "You lost someone too, didn't you?" He nodded slowly. "My wife. The twins were only 2 years old. For a long time I kept our pictures on every wall. I was afraid that if I put them away, I would forget her. But one day I realized her love was not in those pictures. It was already part of me and the boys." Clara listened carefully. His words were simple, yet they touched something deep in her heart. Around them, the twins ran along the shore, chasing each other and calling out to their father. Daniel stood and joined them for a moment, laughing as he helped Eli tie his shoe. Clara watched him, wondering how a man who had lost so much could smile that way. She thought maybe strength was not loud or proud. Maybe it was just this quiet way of still being kind. During the next few days, Clara tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts churned like restless waves. She wanted to keep seeing Daniel and the boys, yet the letter made her feel uncertain. Part of her felt she did not deserve another chance at happiness. Daniel noticed the change in her. When they met again at his workshop, she was quiet and tired. He was sanding a piece of wood when he looked up and said softly, "You don't have to carry the past alone. It will always be beside you, but it does not have to hold you still." Clara stared at the floorboards, her fingers tracing the edge of the table he had built. "It is hard to believe that sometimes," she said. "Take your time," he answered. "No one is rushing you." The twins burst in through the back door, holding a leaflet for a town fair that would happen the next weekend. They begged Daniel and Clara to come with them. She hesitated, but their excited faces made it impossible to refuse. She smiled and said yes. That night in her home, Clara placed Peter's letter back in its envelope and set it on a shelf. She knew the choice did not have to be made yet. She did not have to decide between her past and present in one day. Sometimes she thought, life gives small moments to prepare for big decisions. When the day of the fair arrived, the sun was bright and the streets were full of color and people. Clara laughed as the twins pulled her toward the lemonade stand. Daniel watched her smile and felt something quiet inside him shift like wind in a sail. For Clara, joy had begun to feel like sunlight returning after a long winter. It was still delicate and new, but it was real. And though she did not know where the road ahead would lead, She could feel an invisible thread linking her heart to Daniel and the boys. It was fragile but alive, something strong enough to follow, even in the face of her doubt. The morning after the town fair began bright and calm. Clara awoke with the sound of birds outside her window and the faint smell of rain in the air. Her heart felt light for the first time in years. She remembered how Daniel had laughed the day before when Eli dropped his ice cream and refused to cry, saying it is only fair, the ground was hungry too. The memory made her smile as she poured coffee into her favorite cup, but the feeling of peace did not stay for long. As the sky turned gray, rain began to fall steadily. The quiet sound against the window took her mind back to the letter sitting on the shelf. That letter still waited for an answer. Guilt returned like a heavy shadow. She had not told Daniel that she still had family expecting her to return to the city. She was afraid he would think she had only been passing through his life. By late afternoon, the rain fell harder. Clara looked through the window and saw nothing but water on the glass. Her car keys hung by the door. The need to decide became too strong, so she picked them up and drove toward the lake, hoping the open space would clear her thoughts. As she reached the lakeside road, the car began to slow and then stopped. The engine refused to start again. Rain poured across the windshield and thunder rolled in the distance. She tried the key again and again, but the car stayed silent. Her heart beat fast and panic started to rise. She stepped out, pulling her coat tight, and tried to wave for help. The streets were nearly empty. Suddenly a truck turned the corner with its headlights cutting through the storm. It was Daniel. He stopped when he saw her, jumping out with his jacket already soaked. "Clara, what happened?" he called out over the rain. The car stopped. "I think the engine died," she said, her voice trembling more from emotion than cold. Daniel checked quickly but saw that nothing could be fixed in the dark rain. "Get inside my truck," he said.
Adios.
"You will catch a cold out here." She hesitated, then climbed in. The warmth of the truck and the scent of wood and rain surrounded her. Daniel handed her a towel he kept behind the seat. She dried her hair and tried to calm her breath. "Thank you," she said softly. "I should have stayed home." Daniel looked at her with concern. "You seemed far away these past days. What is really going on?" Clara took a deep breath. "I got a letter from my fiancé's brother. He asked me to come back to the city. I thought I had moved on, but I keep feeling like I am doing something wrong by staying here. Feels like I am leaving him behind if I build a new life." Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel, then relaxed. "You care because you are kind. But love cannot live only in the past. When someone you love leaves this world, they do not want you to stop living. They want you to carry their memory inside a full life." "You are allowed to smile again, Clara." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm afraid to forget him. Afraid that if I let myself be happy, it means I no longer care." Daniel turned to her. "It does not mean that. It means you honor what you had by choosing to live bravely again. You do not replace, you continue." Rain ran down the truck windows and the storm roared like the world wanted to wash every old hurt away.
Ow.
They sat in silence while she cried quietly. Daniel did not say more. He only reached over and held her hand. His hand was rough and warm, steady like a promise that she was not alone. When the rain began to slow, Daniel started the truck. "Let's get you somewhere dry," he said. They drove toward his workshop, where the smell of wood filled the air even in the storm. He made tea on a small stove and they sat side by side on an old bench while thunder rolled far away. Clara looked at his face in the soft light. The lines of worry and kindness made him different from anyone she had known. He carried sorrow just as she did, yet he had found a way to keep living. After a long time, she spoke again. "You and the twins make this town feel like home. I did not plan for that. It just happened." Daniel smiled gently. "Most good things happen that way." They laughed quietly, the sound of rain around them blending with the hum of the air. It felt like a small piece of peace had settled between them, fragile but real. When the storm ended, Daniel drove her back home. The streets were shiny and calm. Clara looked out the window and saw the lake shining under the moonlight. The clouds were breaking apart and stars began to show. Inside her, a soft strength started to grow. The fear did not vanish, but it lost its power. She had faced the storm and still found something kind waiting in its end. As she stepped out of the truck, Daniel said, "Tomorrow will be clearer." She nodded and smiled. That night, she stood by her window and watched the last drops slide down the glass. She knew the choice before her was still open, but now it did not scare her. She felt ready to follow whatever path her heart found right, even if it meant starting again under new skies. Spring came softly that year. The lake grew bright with sunlight, and trees stood full of green leaves again. Clara's small garden behind her house had begun to bloom, and she often found herself humming while tending to the flowers. The heaviness that once followed her had turned into something lighter. She did not forget the past, but it no longer held her like a chain. Daniel and the twins visited often. Sometimes he helped her repair a broken fence. Other times the boys played with a ball near the garden, while she and Daniel talked. Their friendship had turned into something deep and steady, like the quiet rhythm of a heartbeat. There was no rush between them, just the soft growth of trust. One warm afternoon, Clara joined Daniel and the twins for a picnic near the lake. The boys brought bread and jam and a blanket printed with small blue stripes. They spread everything out under a tall tree. The twins began to chase each other across the field while Daniel poured lemonade into paper cups. "You seem happier," he said as he handed her a cup. Clara smiled. "I think I am. For a long time I only looked back, but now I can see the days ahead too." Daniel nodded. "It shows. The boys talk about you all the time. They made drawings of you and put them by their beds." She laughed softly and felt warmth in her chest. The air smelled of grass and fresh water. The twins came running back with a handful of tiny flowers and placed them in her lap. "These are for you," Eli said. "You like flowers more than anyone we know?" "Thank you," she said sweetly. "They are lovely." As they all ate together, Clara noticed how safe she felt near them. There was no pressure, no fear. The thought made her realize something important. Born from pain, this new part of her life was not a shadow of her old one. It was a new beginning built on gentle care and small acts of kindness. Later that week, she finally opened Peter's letter again. She read his kind words one last time, then took a deep breath and wrote back. She thanked him for his love and concern, but said she had found peace in this small town. She told him she hoped he understood that moving forward did not mean letting go of the past. After she mailed the letter, she felt lightness spread through her body like spring wind moving over water. Days became brighter. Clara began to help Daniel with reading to the twins in the evenings. The boys loved stories about ships and animals, and the room always filled with laughter. One night they convinced Daniel to sing an old song from when their mother used to rock them to sleep. His voice was low and full of feeling. Clara listened quietly, holding back tears not from sadness, but from something softer. The sound carried through the small house, and she knew she was witnessing a moment she would never forget. As weeks passed, the bond between Clara and Daniel grew stronger. He would often stop by the library after work to bring her coffee. Sometimes he came with small gifts his sons chose, like a smooth stone or a wildflower. The town people began to notice. They would smile knowingly when they saw them together, but Clara no longer felt nervous about what others thought. One morning, Daniel asked her to walk with him and the twins to the old oak tree by the lake. The boys ran ahead with their kites, leaving the two of them trailing behind. The air was calm and full of the gentle hum of spring insects. Daniel said as they walked, "I want you to know you have become part of our life. The boys see you as family, and so do I." Clara felt her heart beat fast. "You have given me more than you know. I thought my heart had no room left to care. You and the boys proved me wrong." They stopped near the lake, watching the kites lift and flutter in the clear sky. Then Daniel reached for her hand. His touch was firm, but calm. "We do not need to rush anything," he said. "We can build each day slowly." "I would like that," she said. The twins called out for them to see how high their kites had gone. They both laughed and joined the boys, their joined hands swinging between them as they ran through the grass. The sunlight touched the water in bright silver colors. Clara looked around and felt that everything had changed. The bench where she had once cried no longer looked lonely. It now felt like part of a happy memory. The same lake that once mirrored her grief now reflected the laughter of two children and the warmth of a man who understood her heart. As the day ended, they sat together watching the sky turn from gold to soft pink. The twins leaned against them, tired but smiling. Daniel put his arm around both boys, and Clara rested her head on his shoulder. A gentle breeze moved past them, carrying the smell of grass and spring flowers. Clara thought back to that first day on the bench when two small voices had said, "You can share our dad." She realized it had not been a simple moment of kindness. It had been the start of something meant to be. There were still memories that hurt, and some nights when tears would come, but they no longer scared her. Love had not vanished. It changed shape, becoming softer and wider. It lived now in every shared smile, every kind word, and every heartbeat that reminded her she was alive. The lake shimmered under the fading light, calm and endless, as if blessing everything it had seen. Clara knew the world had given her a second chance, not by erasing her pain, but by teaching her that even broken hearts could find their way back to light.